Bei meinem Vater war dunkel. Da waren wir automatisch gleich Zigeuner sowieso. Sogar heute noch ist es so.
Die Einwohner von Lalosch erzählen, dass sie in den offiziellen Statistiken als Bulgaren eingetragen werden und nicht als Roma.
Sie haben uns gesagt, wir würden Hilfe bekommen, irgendwas mit dem Roten Kreuz. So haben sie uns getäuscht und wir haben alle unterschrieben.
Sie sind jung, stolz und wollen ihre Zukunft selbst gestalten. Die Band Pretty Loud singt und rappt gegen eine Welt, die ihr zu eng geworden ist. Gegen Zwangsheiraten, für Ausbildung und Gleichberechtigung.
Wenn Riccardo Sahiti sein Orchester dirigiert, erfüllt ihn das immer wieder mit Stolz. Das Ensemble besteht fast nur aus Musikern, die den Sinti und Roma angehören. So etwas gibt es weltweit nur einmal.
One, two. Hello, welcome at the second day of this very important gathering and exchange of thoughts for the future. My name is Gilda-Nancy Horvath. I'm a journalist and transdisciplinary creator of projects. And what you have seen right now is the only mainstream platform in Europe made by Deutsche Welle Europe, actually worldwide, that is amplifying Romani narratives on a real mainstream media level. On the one hand, Deutsche Welle Europe is very proud to be a pioneer on that. On the other hand, we don't want to stay the only ones to do this. And the title of this panel actually is Amplifying Roma Voices in Policy Making. So what is the red line between media and policy making, and why do I mention this at all? Maybe some days ago, you maybe heard about that a certain person, Professor Zeilinger, was receiving the Nobel Prize. But many people don't know why Mr. Zeilinger received the Nobel Prize, because it's quantum physics. But trust me, we have a connection here. To sum it up, why he received the Nobel Prize, it is the following. He proved scientifically that our thoughts, our mindset, the way we look at something on the level of atoms, shapes the form of what we look at. I repeat, the reality on the level of atoms is shaped by the way we look at it. It's not like the reality is shaping our narrative. It's like our narrative shapes reality. That is also why, if I look at the audience, I am a little bit sad that many people didn't find their way to this panel. Because we have been talking with a lot of nice, expert, great, excellent people yesterday, and it was full. It was too full to sit, right? But now, today, we talk about a space that many of us deny to look at. And if we deny to look at something, we also deny to shape it, as Mr. Professor Zeilinger teaches us very well. So thanks to everybody who is here to look at this topic. And I congratulate you, because why? Those spaces where nobody wants to look is the spaces of innovation, is the spaces of disruption, is the spaces of creation. And who misses to co-create these spaces misses actually the road to the future. So happy that the people on this panel don't miss the chance to participate in it. And I'm very happy to introduce to you the names of the great people who will step into this dialogue here today. First, our two guests who participate online. Thank you a lot for this. Sonja Licht, President of the Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence in Belgrade. Mr. Elvis Memeti from the National Roma Contact Point within the cabinet of the Prime Minister, Government of the Republic of North Macedonia, also online from Skopje. Mr. from the left to the right, Dejan Marković, Forum Roma of Serbia, Belgrade. Adriatik Hasantari from the Roma Active Albania in Tirana. And Aleksandra Bojadjieva, Roma policy expert from the Regional Cooperation Council. And it's not the long titles in their names, in fact, that make them experts. It's the way how they look at things. How they look at things, their perspective shapes the reality. And this is what we need to infuse in policymaking. And that's what we talk about today. So as I have seen yesterday that many people after 5 minutes start scrolling on their phone, or maybe they just want to share with the world what's happening here, both is possible. We turned it around and we start with the question that every panel ends with, but we go into it with. So the first question for our panel, and our online guests are always invited to answer first. Maybe Ms. Sonja Licht will be the first one, and then Elvis Memeti. So the first question on this panel is, what is the most important message that our audience should carry in their minds when they leave today? And maybe you start, Ms. Licht. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this wonderful introduction to the panel. As you said, there are many of those who still deny how important this topic is for the future of our countries, our entire region, and I dare to say, for Europe, definitely. The Roma were too often seen as a population that needed help, that needed social policy measures. This is all true, but the Roma are something else in the first place. When I think about the development of our entire region, and without development, without innovation, our region will simply remain the periphery of periphery. Where are the Roma here? Well, in the times of alarming depopulation of the Western Balkans, Roma are a growing demographic power, but also economic power. For example, in Serbia, 12.5% of those who are newly employed are Roma. When we know that we are dreaming about supply chains to be brought over to this part of the world, when we are dreaming how to catch up with the European Union in many different ways, then we simply need to understand that Roma are a development power for all our countries. And we should, in fact, have a clear policy how to keep them, help them with vocational training, with digital training, and many, many other things that were mentioned, both in Poznan Declaration of 2019, but also recommendations of the Civil Society Forum Berlin, of the Berlin process in 2021. So we need to support their entrepreneurship. We need to help not only the Roma, the entire society, how to transition to a green agenda. In that space, again, we have a special potential where Roma from grey economy should be helped to transition for the good of the entire society in green economy. This is all possible. This is all in this document. Now, I hope we will be able to discuss also today the policies and the political will that will take us there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Mr. Memeti, it's your turn.
Thank you. I think that the current context, primarily uncertainty, fear, war, energy crisis, increased prices, show that the issue that we most often associate with Roma issue are not only minority issue, but challenges of functional state and system that should play a role in changing context with all its weaknesses and strengths. The current situation regarding the inclusion of Roma issue and voices in the creation of policy in the region, in my opinion, it is unfavorable. Why I say this? Because on EU level, for example, there are 12 million Roma, but we have 3 MPs at the EU Parliament. And at the current context, it is really difficult in this condition to talk about these challenges. Green agenda, energy transition, climate change, environment protection, sustainable development, information, investment in infrastructure, when the gap in living condition, infrastructure, education, organization and functionality of the system of provision of public goods and services between Roma and Roma is increasing. For me, that is a regressive message, but we can see many cases or positive examples, especially as a Republic of North Macedonia, where we have a good potential for political organization of the community, which is still in a process of developing. It is good to draw the conclusion in the end that the situation, in my opinion, will not change without our different political action, organization and representation, which works for on full inclusion of this issue, not as a Roma issue, but as prerequisite for good living and functioning of the service system and service for all. So this is the most important thing, what I think that we can take it as a message, in my opinion, back to home, and to think what are the next steps for our self-organizing things. Of course, in a political way.
Thank you, and also thank you for putting emphasis on that point, that whatever we talk about today, it's not segregated to an perspective of ethnicity, but it's blueprints for general mainstream society innovation and how to tackle and approach the very big challenges that we have on the table. Dejan Marković, I just repeat the question, maybe for those who forgot what it is in the first one that we talk about. We talk about what is the most important message or thing that our audience should carry in mind when they leave today.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel, and thank you to organize these such important topics on the Berlin process. On this occasion, I would like to address the issue of Roma participation in policy-making process and how we can move forward from the situation which sometimes look very disappointing. I would like to share with you some findings from new published report from the EU Fundamental Rights Agency, which show us that very small step was done in the field of the Roma inclusion. For example, the director of the EU Fundamental Rights Agency, Michael Flaherty, was mentioned that Roma across Europe still face shocking levels of deprivation, marginalization and discrimination. These findings from the report underlined that national policies still do not deliver fundamental rights to Roma that will change their daily lives. I will just show you some statistics from the report. 61% of the Roma living in housing or the settlements without waters and without indoor toilet. 30% of the Roma children are going to the bed going to bed hungry at least a few times during the previous months. Roma men and women living in 11 years less than people in general populations. This happens despite all Roma inclusion efforts taking the place in the generally EU frameworks. So I have to tell you that we have several regional interventions like Roma Decade process, which was from 2005 to 2015. Mainly the country participating in this process was the Central and East European country. After that, we have the post-decade process, mainly for the enlargement country in the Western Balkans. In generally, with this process, we developed certain framework, institutional framework, strategic framework of the Roma inclusions. Governments adopt the strategy and the following action plan, but what we are missing is how civil society actually participate in this process. We see that the lack of participation of the civil society in this process, especially when it's come to the policy making process. For example, a colleague from Macedonia mentioned the political party. Recently in Serbia was election during these years, and we analyzed mainstream political party who addressed the Roma issues. Only one from those parties who entered to the parliament. Again, I think that participation is crucial, but not only participation. When we are talking about creation of the policy, but we also need to participate in implementation of this policy, which was created by the government. And still, in Balkan, we are facing with anti-Gypsyism as a root cause of discriminations. It's very deep in the society, but as well in institutions. Still, we have the school which doesn't allow Roma to go to the primary school. They create segregated school and institutions. So I think we go one step further than two step back. So I think that also participatory process in general in the Western Balkan sometimes is going in the black hole. So civil society organization address certain issues, but they never get answers from these questions. So I think we are now in good track, in good framework of the Berlin process. We have to use it, all of this accession process and all of these instruments which we have it, like Chapter 23, not only just to stick the box and create a document which is sometimes, let's say, far from reality. We also have to see how these documents should come to the beneficiaries.
Thanks a lot for the input, and thanks also for pointing out that participation not necessarily means that you are invited to co-decide about things. Like participation means you are invited to talk about it, you can give your input, but in the end, still participation does not mean that you're part of the decision that is made in the very end. Mr. Hasantari, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Gilda. First of all, for the wonderful introduction you did in the beginning. Let me share your also the disappointment of not having a full audience here today, even though we have been very carefully following all the programs and trying to make sure that, of course, all the topics that have been discussed yesterday and today and will be discussed in the future are very relevant to Roma inclusion. It is, though, very difficult to answer to your question because there are a lot of things in and out that I want not only this audience to take forward, but let me start with a small addendum of the title of the panel, Amplifying Voices. We're speaking about amplifying voices like 15 years ago. Now we speak about full participation. So I'm sure that the organizer has the best intention, and thank you anyway for the invitation today, but I think it's important to look at things the way they are. We speak, as already Dejan mentioned, we speak about full participation in all levels of the society and not only on the policy making. But let me also bring you a little bit on what is actually the biggest problem of the majority. That's not a Roma problem, and that's anti-Gypsyism. Anti-Gypsyism, it has to do with, it is a specific racism towards Roma, Sinti, and travelers, who are stigmatized as a gypsy on the eyes of the majority society. And that's the biggest problem of majority society. So I don't want to think that, for instance, the people, to make it more concrete and more actual, that people who didn't came here aren't anti-Gypsies, but they had meetings or different priorities to follow. But it's very important to look at the root causes on why certain situations across the Western Balkans and Europe, it is, as already Dejan described it with the data he shared with us. So anti-Gypsyism, it's not a minority issue, and I want to repeat it again, it's a majority issue. It doesn't have to do with what has been told and how hateness has been spread online, which we talked today, although it affects Roma mostly. It has to do with the things that you are also not doing. For instance, imagine yourself, you go in a city, which can be Belgrade or Tirana or Sarajevo, and then you go to Roma Mahalla, and then you see there's no investment there whatsoever, no lights, no sewage system. That's anti-Gypsyism attitude of the mayor in that town and of the people who work in that municipality. And that's what we need your help of the audience here to fight it for. On the other hand, it is very important to also acknowledge, because often we also find ourselves in trying to battle within think tanks or civic society, you may call it whatever, that when we explain that in any crisis that is in the horizon or it's happening, Roma are the first to suffer, then we will always listen other groups. Then, no, but we have also this group, and now we have that group. For instance, during the corona pandemic, when we were calling for help, because literally and across the Western Balkans, we had people would starve. We would have a catastrophic situation because people could not really provide or didn't have any food at their home. The answer we got from the government in that time, it was that, but the whole population is suffering like this. So we do understand that the government were not ready to tackle and to engage in what happened because no one knew. But it also takes a lot of time to explain why it's urgent to invest on Roma inclusion, why it's urgent to invest on Roma inclusion, and what are the benefits of both, of the majority population, but also of the government structure. And anti-Gypsyism, it's a historic persecution that Roma have been suffering, not only from the majority, but also often what we call an institutional anti-Gypsyism, from non-action or intentional action of the government, both central and sometimes local. For instance, if you want me to give you another example, what would make anti-Gypsyism more tangible, I'm sure, at least the audience which is here in the room today is well informed. You have witnessed forced eviction in your cities across the Western Balkans. How numbers of families has been evicted, whether for building a better building or a construction company, or because the municipality wanted the land. And here it's not whether the mayor belongs to left or right. Here we have observed that all local authorities, when it comes to territories, they behave the same. So then you see, and imagine a child which is being evicted at the age of 5, and then he's been evicted 5 times, and then imagine how he would contribute for a society and how he would trust to the institution to settle his life and contribute for the city or for the neighborhood he lives for. On the other hand, we have looked at a lot how, and we want to make a call on how the issue, how the Roma issue could be better engaged within the regional cooperation, because that's, we believe, it's the only way to tackle Roma inclusion and make sure that Roma inclusion, it's a win-win situation for everyone in society. And I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot for this very broad, very important input. Ms. Bojadjieva, also I ask you, if our audience goes home today, what is the one or the many things that they should keep in mind when they leave us?
Thank you, Gilda. I'm very happy to be here with my estimated colleagues on the panel. I would also like to thank the organizers for organizing this civil society forum, and also the German government for the Berlin summit. And I particularly want to thank Ms. Anna Lurman, the Minister of State for Europe and Climate Change, because she had very positive words during the ministerial meeting on the Poznan Declaration that was held in October 2022 in Podgorica. And I will start with this, that is building on what Adriatik and Dejan said, which is that we need to focus on anti-Gypsyism. I'm very happy that the ministerial meeting included this in their recommendations or points that they would like to share with the summit. And I would like to think that we as civil society also have the responsibility to tackle the issues of importance and significance at our time. Why I'm saying this? Because you know that the European Union has adopted a new EU Roma framework, which is for equality, participation and inclusion. For the last 20 years, we were dealing mainly with inclusion, the socioeconomic aspect, meaning health, employment, education, housing. We have made some progress. We are not happy with it, but we have made some progress. I would agree with Ms. Sonja Licht, who said that we still need to work a lot in including Roma in the green agenda, the transformation of work, in employment, with a lot of you that mentioned housing. But now, finally, it's time to tackle anti-Gypsyism, because we figured out that this is the root cause of everything that has happened to Roma in the past centuries, and now we are seeing the effects, and working on dismantling the effects of anti-Gypsyism is a very long and demanding process. It is not enough to say that our legislation treats everybody equally. If people are in different position, they are not equal, they need equality of opportunities, and we need to tackle this, and we need to figure this out. So my first message would be, and I would like to take you back 20 years ago when we said nothing for Roma without Roma. So this is the message we need to go home with. And I would now change it to not only nothing for Roma without Roma, nothing at all without Roma, because we need to mainstream Roma in everything that we do, in the green agenda, in the digital agenda. I'm not going to repeat the reasons, because my colleagues mentioned the reasons for this, and these are very valid reasons. But I would like to go back to the topic we are discussing, amplifying the voices of Roma, which means participation. So the participation is the second priority of the EU Roma framework. And also, as Ms. Licht mentioned, it is part of the Poznan Declaration. And I would just like to read this point 5 of the Poznan Declaration that says that our economies commit to establish channels and mechanisms for joint involvement of Roma communities in the formulation of policies, decision-making, implementation and monitoring of the efforts to achieve the objectives of this declaration. So we need to see Roma everywhere. But do we see them everywhere in decision-making, in implementation and so on? Unfortunately, we don't. And I see a declining trend. I know Elvis mentioned that in North Macedonia people are trying to organize politically, and it's I would commend this process, but we also see that we had a ministerial position and now we don't. We have advisor to the Prime Minister. We also have unchanged number of MPs. We virtually don't have in the judiciary system any Roma. One of the Poznan Declaration objectives is to have proportional number of Roma working in the public sector. We don't see it. We have very little numbers of Roma working in the public sector. We have for years, for decades now, Roma working as mediators, health mediators, teaching assistants, local coordinators and so on, which are still working contract-based without security of employment. We need to work on this. The formal bodies that Dejan mentioned, they have a symbolic role. They have less and less role in advocating for real changes in the society. And last but not least, what is happening with our Roma civil society. The context is such that the money that is going to in the region for civil society is getting bigger, and Roma civil society is getting not competitive and is losing its capacities. So these are things that we need to be aware of. It is a grim picture, but we really need to do much more on this participation aspect and the amplifying of the voice of Roma in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this input. So we already move into the second round. And the question of the second round is, what is needed to reach the goal of political participation in political processes? So what do we really need to do? And why we must discuss this as the second question today is something that was mentioned. It's the question of power. So yes, it's not enough to just say we treat everybody equally, when in fact we do not treat them equally, and we did not treat them equally. So everybody of us sitting here in a privileged situation of power somehow, right? There is an imbalance of power. And if we invite somebody, I can invite my cat, and maybe I know what my cat wants to eat every day, but in the end I go to the supermarket and I buy what the cat must eat, right? Simple as that. It's also in political processes. Inviting somebody doesn't mean that we give them the power to really participate in the decision. So we have an imbalance of power. So it's not enough to just invite people to say something in some process. Everything. So many Romani dialogue platforms. We have a very nice one in Austria too, which is working, and it's very nice. But still, everybody of you, or maybe some of you know, there is, in each country, there's a national Roma contact point, right? How many Roma national contact points have Roma in this position? Nearly none. Meaning that all the Roma national contact points, people who work in this position, are not Romani people. So if not even this one job, this one position we have in each nation for the coordination of strategic thoughts and self-organization, we don't trust Romani people to take the seat that is made for them. So we can for sure not talk about some kind of real participation or even leadership. So I repeat the question for the second round, and we will again start with Ms. Sonja Licht. What is needed to reach the goal of real participation of Romani communities in political process?
Well, Gilda, as you already said, in fact, political will is needed. And this political will has to be operationalized in very concrete terms. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, Opre Roma of Serbia had a media conference because yesterday was, in fact, the declared end. It will continue for a few days because obviously they couldn't end it in a month, of the census in Serbia. And although a lot has been done in preparation from the Romani side, I know a number of individuals who were also very, very much involved. For example, the Roma Initiative Office, Mensur Haliti, and I could go on with the names, in preparation of in helping to prepare the right attitude and approach and operational activities. Unfortunately, yesterday we heard that many omissions, in fact, wrong approaches were implemented, and Opre Roma made it very clear that this is not statistical, but this is a political issue. Now, the good news is that this conference was in the media, that as far as I understand, it was a very decent presentation of what Opre Roma criticized, but also there was the recommendation, very important, that the government now must take all the existing documents and in a responsibly administrative way, make sure that the census results will not be the only ones that they will in fact build their policies on. As we know, census is one in 10 years. As we know, whether we like it or not, the numbers there are extremely important for everybody, especially minorities. And so it is absolutely necessary to prove what we in fact heard in many different declarations in this country as well, and I must say, some of them proved to be true. We have the first branch office of Adriatik in Belgrade, with the support of the Serbian government. They gave the space in the center of the city. There is a promise that the almost 50 people who completed their education in the Academy for Public Administration will receive, in fact, employment in the administration, both locally and nationally. It is still a promise. We had elections that were very long period of while the new government was established. But there are these almost, as I said, 50 people who were promised that they will be employed in the administration. I also heard the wonderful news that we will have in Serbia very soon the first judge who is a Roma woman, to make it even better. But these are small steps, and the small steps, in my humble opinion, need an overall policy that will prove that it is being able to overcome anti-Gypsyism. Unfortunately, the census so far did not prove it. There are possibilities, it will be prolonged for a while. I hope there will be some attempts to make it more accurate, but we need much more, in fact, if we want Poznań Declaration and all the other documents, including, of course, of the EU and the Convention on Fundamental Rights, to be really respected. Otherwise, these societies will prove that they are still suffering from very deep inbuilt racism, and this is going to be used and misused by rising far right, both in our countries, but also in Europe.
Thanks a lot, again, also for pointing to the very important point of political will. We are already running short in time, I see. So I really urge you to stick to your very important comments and really focus on what the audience should take away from it. Mr. Han, we are with Elvis still. What is needed to reach the goal of political participation?
Thank you. Again, let's going back a little bit also on our dilemma with national movement via, especially the question is how to draw the attention to in this current situation when many of Roma actually see the politics as bad things. And it's really hard to draw attention to a specific document and strategy which is not in this context related to energy, food, reforms. And that's why the documents and strategy are an example, in our opinion, of good diplomatic and soft policy that only allow the issue to be on the agenda without some major or substantial changes. If we want to make a big movements and make something out of nothing, then we need, as I mentioned in the beginning, political self-organization or a collective who presents this problem not as a social demands, but as an idea to the society as well. Namely, when we choose who will set the priorities, whether the conservatives or the progressives, whether the left, the center, or the extreme right-wing parties, then we should send a clear message that the Roma actually want a system that works for everyone. If an average European lives well, that means that we also as a Roma live good, and it is good also for us. Based on these challenges, the best is to let the people to self-organize in a free and a non-manipulative way. That is enough to see the potential. Also, I want to mention that the interest groups, lobby groups, political parties, and even NGO need to understand that the existing gap that has been created between us who lead the work and those who have something to say. When we understand that gap, we will see the change, not as a one-time decision, but to one-time decision to help them, but as a necessary change, or at least as an adaptation of the system to these new challenges. Here I mean the political and civil organization which plans and implements measures and ideas, open and direct investment in the potential infrastructure, intervention in human capital and in Roma neighbors, and maybe the most important, there should be put more efforts to stop the corruption during the election, meaning to stop buying the votes from Roma. For an example, which I also can mention, for the audience, that the Open Balkan, for example, for us or this regional cooperation means more jobs, job opportunities, free movement, civil status, common value, and freedom. Accession in the EU also, all this negotiation process as well, but it is also necessary to understand that in some chapters on the negotiation process, we have to have targeted and general action that we equalize the status of the Roma community. Let's take as an example the fact that the Roma community is primarily, as the panelists mentioned, is a younger nation from a democratic point of view, which means that this is a potential for the region, both in politics and in a civil sense, but also present an economic opportunity for the region to invest more on Roma, as in a smart economy, in a win-win situation for one side, solving of lasting issue and also increasing the state budget. Works on combination of targeting and mainstream policy with a special budget for the Roma strategy is also needed. Or for the EU and IPA instrument, this could mean that an entire programming process must go to a budget that is responsive as possible as can, because this means that we need a more direct purpose and intervention, either in infrastructure, in education, and transition to the formal economy. I want to put the efforts again in this key message how we can face this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. And for each on the panel, maybe you really try to sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences, because we are really out of time. But still, this is important. So please, 1 sentence each. And Dejan.
I will be very shortly. I mean, all of the speakers say that political will is crucial. I agree with this, but also have in mind that these Western Balkan regions, I mean, employ somebody in the institution doesn't mean that they have a power to change. We have, how to say, a long tradition that people are employed in the institution just to be manipulated and just to fulfill the form. For example, we saw the colleague from North Macedonia mentions this election process. So we have it election process for the national minority councils with bags as them. So one list was taking the power with the 33 seats. All 33 persons on the list was a member of the ruling party. Also, I'm afraid that if somebody is employed, they needed to have the card from the ruling party as well. So they didn't see them as a participatory process, rather they see them as how to manipulate it with votes. So I think that this is really a challenging situation for us. How to create a certain environment that we should really have the participations on the institutions. For example, in Serbia, according to the constitutions, each minority has to have equal representation to the census. So that's very important. What Ms. Licht was mentioned, that the census data. I mean, no one except Hungarian minorities in Serbia doesn't fulfill this criteria.
Thank you.
Of course, it's very difficult within a very short time to mention all the things we need to achieve the goal you just mentioned. But definitely, it's important to fight anti-Gypsyism. It's important for the government in the region not to see Roma issue as a peripheral issue, but rather than be more ambitious and invest into sustainability rather than on piecemeal projects that also make Roma civic society jump from project to another, but also enabling an environment with strong Roma civic society. We see ourselves, it was mentioned already by Aleksandra, that the funds in the region are coming with a bigger budget, and there we compete with international organizations. That's not a fair competition, but also the actors and the factors that are in the field. It's very important to look at not only the potential, but the needed for investment. And I want the government and donors to be more ambitious, because often the things we see, they're less ambitions, and the strategic documents are very less ambitions from where this society across the region needs to go.
Thank you. And for the audience, I know you're already nervous and want more coffee, but everybody of us was traveling here, so I think the last 2 minutes we can keep calm and listen to the last sentences of this discussion.
Thank you, Gilda. I will not repeat. I agree with what my colleagues mentioned about anti-Gypsyism, about employment in the public sector, about raising the political voice. I would just like to add 2 more points. One is creating allies. You know, I hoped that this forum will enable a space for it, but I join Gilda in expressing my sorrow that not all the people that were here in the morning and yesterday are here for this panel to hear us and to maybe engage with us on this topic. And I hope that we are going to have some more recommendations, even maybe a whole chapter in the recommendations from this Civil Society Forum towards the Berlin Summit. That's one thing. So I believe that we should do things together. And the other thing is mainstreaming. Even if we are not able to achieve something for Roma explicitly and targeted, we should still try to achieve as many things possible in the mainstream, in energy transition, in climate change, because there were things mentioned and I would not like to repeat, but we should try. I mean, I'm calling us, Roma, to actually try to have our seat in very other agendas and topics, and that should also help raising the voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe one sentence to end this panel. First, thanks everybody that you're here and kept calm and listened to us and invited us, hopefully also in the future. I talked to some progressive people in the audience. They were saying things like, I said what I thought and maybe they don't invite me anymore. If we think about this approach, I listen to this oftentimes at many conferences, so to the organizers, keep inviting progressive, innovative people who dare to say actually what is needed and not what everybody wants to hear, because then the conference will be a driver for innovation. And the very last sentence is, yesterday outdoor I heard a person speaking about diversity. I didn't know that person, but it was a person that was here at the conference. And this person was saying, why do we talk about diversity? Oh my God, we cannot put all of this under one umbrella. It will not fly. That's a quotation. And actually, I want to end with the same thing that I started today. This is how we look at things. So the other side of diversity, if you turn the word diversity around, it means plurality. If you have no diversity inside your teams, your organizations, and in policy making, you have no plurality. If we talk about diversity only as a thing of ethnicity, obviously we have a very, very narrow mind, because it's much more than this. If we talk about diversity, we talk about the plurality of perspectives in policy making. And this is not only according to Roma, it's about the BPOC people, it's about the transsectional interaction of many different groups. It's also about the collaboration of so-called conservative and so-called leftist, because at this very moment, and some of you were at the hate speech today already in the workshop, right? The real threat that we are fighting against also when we talk about transformation of climate policies is in fact anti-democratic movements. Whatever we talk about, if it's about Roma, BPOC, human rights, transformation in climate change, what we in fact fight against is anti-democratic thoughts and movements. And the very last sentence, yesterday was somebody asking, what is the incentives for transformation, for climate, new climate politics? What is the incentive? Maybe I'm super naive, But I think it's survival. This is the main incentive of why we should change policies, is our own survival. And that the person in this circle is asking for incentives, for me shows one thing clearly. And one very intelligent person gave me the answer. Well, it's because industries are powerful and mighty, and they don't care if we survive as long as they have profit. So let me give you that one thought. We are policy makers, not serving private companies is our job. It's our job to dream. It's our job to put this in political papers that will show industries that we are not ready to sacrifice our survival for their profit. So, okay, now you might don't invite me next year, but the people who go home today, I think we got the message, and fighting anti-gypsyism is something very important and crucial, because this is the space, the blueprint for everybody else who wants to disrupt the things that we don't like, actually now in politics. Thanks for being here. Thanks, everybody. Nice to menge.
Nice to meet you.